The Locked On Podcast Network presents the NFL Big 3 in 30. The three biggest stories in the NFL from our local experts at the Locked On Podcast Network. We bring you the real story, why it matters, what's next, who wins the big game, and more, all in 30 minutes. The NFL Big 3 in 30 starts now with the biggest story in the NFL.
The NFL's witch hunt against the Tush push went a little bit too far.
You are Locked On Eagles, your daily Philadelphia Eagles podcast.
What an embarrassing day for the NFL. What an embarrassing day for 16 owners who voted against the Tush push being in the NFL. What an embarrassing day, I think, for Roger Goodell, who I believe is behind the Packers' original proposal of the push ban. I think he's behind a lot of these teams trying to justify this play getting removed from the NFL by hiding behind the take that it's a risky play, it can cause injuries, or trying to be proactive rather than reactive, despite all of the data showing this play does not cause injuries. It's no less dangerous, no more dangerous than any other play on a football field. And yet this witch hunt, this war against the Tush push continues. Despite these owners not getting a majority vote, the 24 votes it takes to pass this rule to ban this play, despite them only getting 16 of those votes and needing 8 more, instead of it being a final decision, like all the other proposals, nope, it's being tabled until May. So basically, because I think Roger Goodell and the minority owners here did not get their way, it's going to be tabled until they can convince 8 more owners to vote in favor of removing the play. We'll talk about it in a few months when we can lobby some more people to vote against this play. We can get to that 24 total, and we can remove it for 2025. How is that reasonable? How is that fair? How is that how it works? Like, if I'm the Philadelphia Eagles, I'd be furious. You didn't get enough votes to get this done. So we'll see you next year for round 3. For the third witch hunt in a row against this play. And by the way, it's not the third witch hunt in a row. It's 3 of the last 4 years owners are trying to get rid of this play, because in 2023, nobody had a problem with it. Want to know why? Because the Philadelphia Eagles weren't in a Super Bowl like they were in 2022, like they were in 2024. I think these owners are hiding behind the injury take. And the real reason they want this play removed, it reeks of jealousy. They're absolutely jealous that the Eagles have perfected a play and they just can't stop it. There's nothing they can do about it. That's really what it is. And it's also that they just don't like the aesthetics of it. A lot of even, Matt LaFleur, the Green Bay Packers head coach, said it doesn't look like a football play, which is ridiculous. If you're removing a play because it doesn't look pretty, I mean, I'm sorry, but that's just not a good enough justification. The injuries are not a good enough justification because the data is not there. So what is it about this play that we're removing? Look, and I've said it on the show before, if the Philadelphia Eagles were running this on 1st and 10, because branding in football, the entertainment value, it does matter. So I do get it to a degree, the aesthetics of it, if the Eagles were abusing this play. But they very rarely run this play. It's only in very certain situations. It's a minuscule thing. It's a minuscule part of the game that does not impact football enough to have this much of a passionate discourse about it, to have this much of a back and forth war over the course of 3 years. Like it's not that important. Again, like I said, like I was getting into, if the Eagles were doing this on 1st and 10, 2nd and 6, because they probably could get away with that and still move the football. If they were doing that and abusing it and running it a high percentage of the time, yeah, then get rid of it. But they only run it in an obvious 3rd and 4th and inches situations, only when they're on the 1 yard line. They rarely even run it. Like if they're on the 2 or the 3, odds are they're giving the ball to Saquon Barkley or they're running another play. Like that's why I don't understand this war against it. I really just think it reeks of jealousy. And if you're really discussing injuries, and that's what a lot of people are hiding behind, if you're really concerned about injuries, then why have we never brought up getting rid of the quarterback sneak? The quarterback sneak is as equal of a dangerous play as this one. Like there is no difference between these plays outside of two guys pushing the quarterback forward. And I thought the Eagles owner, Jeffrey Lurie, made a really good point today in his press conference saying that this play is actually more safe than a quarterback sneak because he does have two guys pushing him forward, protecting him, stabilizing him. Whereas a quarterback sneak, there's more spearing going on. It can be a more dangerous play because the quarterback's exposed. And if you're the NFL, the quarterback's your golden goose. They're their golden boy, the first child, the firstborn son. Don't you want to protect the quarterbacks? Like, they're your meal ticket. I thought Lurie made a great point there, and he discussed it today. Like, if there were real concerns about injuries, he too would be in favor of banning the push, like he was in favor of, banning a few years ago the hip drop tackle. I don't think this play is any more dangerous than, are we going to get rid of throwing the football over the middle of the field because that's dangerous? Like, you know what I mean? This is not spearing a player, like, leaving your feet to hit a guy in the head, targeting. I don't think this play is really all that violent. It's no different than any other power football play, like a quarterback sneak or a fullback dive, even any quarterback runs, a read option play. Like, your quarterback's still getting hit. So, I just think all of the reasoning I've been listening to and the hypocrisy of Sean McDermott saying he cares about the player's safety, even though he runs it more than any team that's not Philadelphia. So clearly he doesn't care about players that much, or that's not the priority. He's saying it's a priority now, but not when his team is on the football field. They ran it a ton in the AFC Championship. It didn't work, though. Maybe that's why he's kind of bitter about this play. But yeah, I just think it's embarrassing. I wish people would just come out and say why they don't like the play, and they're not doing it. I do really think, though, Roger Goodell, who said today that he supports the play getting removed, that it could be dangerous in the future with the way the offensive linemen are positioned, blah, blah, blah. I do think he pushed the Green Bay Packers to propose this rule. I obviously think Green Bay was in on it too. They could be bitter that they lost to the Eagles in the playoffs, but I do think Roger Goodell is trying to spread this thing across the league to get rid of the play, and maybe that's also why this was tabled until May, because the commissioner is a big part of that decision. I'm not sure. I'm not 100% sure about how the process works with this voting, but I know they didn't get enough votes today to ban it, and yet this is going to be brought back up in May. Like other decisions that were made today aren't going to be discussed or opened back up in May. So why is this one? I don't know. It feels like a witch hunt against one team, against the Eagles. The rest of the league could do it too. They don't do it. And that's the part I don't get. Like, why, if you're an NFL team, if you see such an effective play that doesn't cause injuries, why would you want to remove that for yourself? Like, you're creating a disadvantage to your own team. If you just kept it simple, like the Eagles do, instead of trying to be cute on 3rd and inches and run a quarterback sneak, or a quarterback play, a passing play, or a run play from the shotgun, or the stupid thing that Baltimore did against Buffalo in the divisional round where they roll Lamar to his right, cut the field in half, instead of just jamming your quarterback up the middle for an inch. Like, if NFL teams were just smart enough to figure that out, they wouldn't want to get rid of this play either. That's the part I don't get is, teams should be like, hold on. Instead of saying the Eagles do this and we can't stop it, let's get rid of it, you should say, like a lot of other plays in the league, it's a copycat league, read option, RPOs, that kind of stuff was copied in the league because it works. Why wouldn't you as another team say, let's implement this in our offense as well? Even if it's not with our quarterback, who's not Jalen Hurts or Josh Allen, but like Baltimore, they use Mark Andrews. Let's use our tight end under center. Let's use a Travis Kelce for Kansas City. That's what these teams should be doing instead of just this constant war. And I'm just over it. And I got news for you. Even if they remove the tush push, the Eagles are still going to be the best short yardage offense in football. Like, the quarterback sneak is not getting banned. And they were very effective with the quarterback sneak when Carson Wentz was the quarterback. They were very effective in 2021, early 2022 when they used the quarterback sneak with Jalen Hurts. Jeffrey Lurie said it best today. The bread and butter of this play is that they have a quarterback that can squat 600 pounds and an offensive line with all-pro talent. And that's not going away even if you remove Saquon Barkley and Dallas Goedert, giving Jalen Hurts a little extra nudge. The real strength of this play is not going away. And I almost, in a way, part of me wants it banned. So the Eagles can still be the best short yardage offense in the league. They can still be unstoppable with this style of play, and they can tell the league to shove it. So go ahead, ban it. you're still not going to stop this football team on 3rd and 4th and inches on the 1-yard line. I just think it's ridiculous, and it's just an embarrassing look for the league today. And again, it's hypocritical by Sean McDermott. It lacks any real logic or reasoning when it comes to the injuries. I think it's just pure jealousy, and they don't like the aesthetic of it. But even if you don't like the aesthetic of it, that's not something to hide behind or to ride with on a potential ban, because the Eagles don't abuse this play enough for it to matter all that much. Again, they don't run this play enough for it to hurt the aesthetics of the football game, to hurt the brand, to hurt the entertaining product of a game. It really doesn't matter enough. It's not impactful enough for it to be this intense of a back and forth discussion that Jeffrey Lurie has to have like 5 to 6 questions asked about it today, and they're going to table it until May. I don't know. It's ridiculous.
March Madness is almost over, and FanDuel is giving you the chance to get in on the action like never before. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. That's $200 extra bucks to use on everything from buzzer beaters to Cinderella stories and even who's cutting down the nets. The FanDuel app is simple to use, and when I win, I get paid instantly. No waiting around. Check out some NBA games while you're at it. The Pistons have a tough Western Conference matchup with the Thunder. FanDuel has the Thunder favored by 15. Visit FanDuel.com and get in on all the hoops action.
Calais Campbell's made his free agency decision, and it will not be returned to the Miami Dolphins.
You are Locked On Dolphins, your daily Miami Dolphins podcast.
Calais Campbell going back to where it all began, and not in college, where he played his college ball at the University of Miami, but back to Arizona, where he was originally drafted to play yet another NFL season. It was reported and announced yesterday afternoon. Campbell has agreed to terms on a contract with the Cardinals that will pay him $5 million per season with incentive dollars up to $7.5 million per season. So not aware. Miami did have a standing offer in with Calais Campbell. Where that fell on that spectrum as a competitive offer, I can't say with any level of intelligence. Now, it's been speculated that Miami, I believe somebody that had purported to speak with Calais Campbell said something on social media over the weekend that Miami was sitting under $3 million for their offer. And I think the first thing that I would like to mention in the fallout of the Calais Campbell decision is I think Calais Campbell's earned a dollar amount and a price point in that stratosphere for his contract. And if I were the Dolphins and if I was really invested in getting Calais Campbell back, that would not have been a dollar amount that would have been considered a deal breaker for me, especially with how good he was last year and the leadership elements he brings to the team. The team ultimately, though, deciding to go in a different direction. And there's some fallout here that I think is important to note. But one thing that I think you mentioned off the start is take some consideration into the players that the Dolphins have brought in this offseason. Players the Dolphins signed from other teams. Larry Borum from Chicago, 26 years old. Zach Wilson, 26 years old. KJ Britt, 26 years old. Iafitu Melifonwu, 26 years old. Ryan Stonehouse, 26 years old. Alexander Madison, 27 years old. Willie Gay Jr., 27 years old. James Daniels, 28 years old. Nick Westbrook-Akine, 28 years old. Ashton Davis, 29 years old. Artie Burns, no guaranteed money on that contract whatsoever, not a guarantee to make the roster. 30 years old. Pharaoh Brown at tight end, guarantees of $20,000 out of a $1.355 million one-year contract. So effectively no guarantees for Pharaoh Brown, 31 years old. There is a youth movement going on with the Miami Dolphins. The transition from Teron Armstead to Patrick Paul at left tackle, and regardless of what Teron ultimately decides to do, I'd be surprised if the Dolphins brought him back. I would. Everything that they are doing as a team that was one of the oldest rosters in football last year gives you an indication that the Dolphins are transitioning into the next nucleus of team to cycle up for their next competitive window. And that, unfortunately, does not fall in sync with what everybody perceives as to be all sunshine and rainbows, and everybody perceives that there's an urgency to win that would transcend doing the best thing both long-term and short-term for the team. The Dolphins aren't operating that way. And I think that's where there was probably some clues here for the intentions with Calais Campbell. You can look right now, and the Dolphins still, from an average age perspective, after being one of the oldest rosters in football, they still have Teron Armstead on the books. Their average age is 26.7 years old. They have double-digit draft picks. They're one draft pick away from having as many draft picks as anybody else in the class. They're this tied for the 7th youngest roster in football, and they're 0.3 years average age away from being tied for the 2nd youngest roster in football. So I'm not surprised that this didn't happen. If it were me, I personally would have said, hey, Calais, we can match the offer if you'd like to be back next year. We really value your leadership. We really value your play. We loved having you here. I'm sure all those things are true. And maybe the Dolphins tried to do that. I can't say for certain that they didn't. But I know that Calais Campbell agreed to terms to sign a contract with the Arizona Cardinals. Now, part of the motivation here is probably something to do with Miami now, with Calais Campbell's departure on a 1-year, $5 million up to $7.5 million contract. The Dolphins are now projected to be in position to collect a 26, not this year, not in 3 weeks, 4th round compensatory pick for the loss of Javon Holland in free agency. Remember, compensatory picks work as a matter of net losses versus net gains amongst qualifying players. They've signed 2 qualifying free agents above the dollar amount that qualifies as compensatory gains. That's James Daniels and Zach Wilson. Those are the 2 players that the Dolphins signed. Their losses, Javon Holland qualifies for a 4th, Calais Campbell qualifies for a 6th, and Robert Jones qualifies for a 7, meaning the Dolphins are net -1, and they will, provided everything stays the same between now and the Monday after the NFL draft, when the window closes for how they calculate compensatory gains and losses, the Dolphins are going to get a 4th round draft pick in 2026 for Javon Holland's departure. That was not possible unless Calais Campbell signed a contract and signed it before the Monday after the NFL draft. He did that. So I would imagine the thought process for the Dolphins is, we have our price. We want to have you back, but we want to have you back at our price, and we're not going to be desperate about it, because if it doesn't work out, we ultimately know we will be getting a draft pick for a 39-year-old player who played for $2 million last year. That's a 4th round draft pick, and that's better or equal to what they were offered for Calais Campbell at the trade deadline, and they were able to keep him for the remainder of season. Now they just have to wait an extra 12 months to get the draft pick that they are indirectly getting because Calais Campbell signed, to free up Javon Holland's departure to get the compensatory pick. So a very roundabout, sweet irony way to get there, but that's kind of how you make sense of a team that is very much in a youth movement, right? They are recalibrating, and if you want to call it a rebuild, just don't call it the kind of rebuild that we saw in 19, because that's not a standard expectation. And teams at times compete through rebuilds or retoolings or the transition into a life cycle, and I think that's where the Dolphins are at right now. They're a team that's in transition. It'll be fascinating to see what they're able to achieve this offseason amidst that infusion of all these young players. And we're going to talk a little bit about the draft here today, and we're taking a break from talking about players at certain positions that are specific targets. But we'll talk about combinations at defensive tackle, because I think that's where this realistically leaves the Dolphins now. There are some free agents of interest that are still out there on the market, but this is a very good defensive tackle class. I can't state that enough. And I think that's, if the Dolphins are going to take this position that currently has Zach Sealer, Benito Jones, and nothing else of note, you're probably going to need to add 3 names to this list, at minimum 2. One of them's probably going to need to be a veteran.
The NCAA tournament is here, and so is the Bracket Breakdown.
Locked On Podcast Network and Amazon Fire TV channels are teaming up to deliver NCAA tournament coverage like never before. Watch studio shows featuring former players and Locked On's local experts as they guide you through every upset, buzzer beater, and bracket matchup.
Stream it all for free on Amazon Fire TV channel. Search Bracket Breakdown to see it all for free.
It's your team every day.
If the Browns want to take the best player available at 2, it's going to be Travis Hunter.
You are Locked On Browns, your daily Cleveland Browns podcast.
We know the Browns have a very difficult decision to make here, and a little over 3 weeks from now, April 24th, when they're on the clock at number 2, choosing a player, deciding whatever it is that they're going to do with the number 2 overall pick, Cam Ward's likely to be off the board. And so this conversation is very much turned into, as we know, a debate over, do you go quarterback because you need a quarterback and take Shedeur Sanders, who, again, I think is worthy of being picked there if the Browns view him in that same light, even though others might not. Meanwhile, the other option is Abdul Carter, it seems. Those seem to be the 2 sides of the fan base that have sort of formed here. People who are, it's funny, Kevin Stefanski at the owners' meetings this week said he's not going to be banging the table for any one player. He sees a lot of talented players that could be options there. I think the fan base at this point is kind of at a point where there's one section of the fan base banging the table for one specific idea or path to walk down on draft night, and another one that's doing that's banging the table for another. The easy and obvious one is quarterback, because it's the most important position in the game and you need one. And so you're in this position to draft one highly. Why not do it? And then the other one is Abdul Carter. That seems like where the split has sort of formed between these 2 contingencies of the fan base that have sort of developed here. But I'm going to be honest, like, if you're trying to think about best player available and what the Browns should do when it comes to taking somebody at 2 that isn't a quarterback, if they're going to do that and that's going to be the strategy, I actually think Travis Hunter makes more sense than Carter. And I'm using Jimmy Haslam's quotes, Jimmy Haslam's press conference transcripts sort of against him here, not against him, but as context here, where he flat out, said it might take a year or 2 to figure out this quarterback position, and made it known like they're not going to force the issue on finding a quarterback just because they need that position filled. And so if he's not forcing anybody to take a quarterback at 2, he's not going to demand somebody gets taken. He's going to let his guys figure it out. And if they view that somebody's worthy, they'll do it. If not, then they got to take best player available. And so understanding that the Browns are trying to go about this in a way, with some patience, and that Jimmy Haslam seems to be showing some patience in the way that he's going to let this team sort of retool and rebuild and figure itself out. I feel like the path they're going to go is going to be take best player available 2, wait on a quarterback, and we'll get somebody like, again, Jalen Milroe, Jackson Dart, whatever, later on in the first round or whatever it might be. It's just feeling more and more like that's going to be the path forward. Maybe I'm wrong, and Shedeur Sanders is still the guy, and I would love that because I think he's worthy, as I've said. But if it comes down to what Haslam is saying, where he's like, we're not forcing the issue at quarterback, we're going to think about this from a smart perspective and take the best player on the board that we think is going to benefit our football team and be a foundational piece. I think that player is more so. I think Travis Hunter is more that than Abdul Carter is, and I'll explain. I think there's been something sort of misconstrued when it comes to Abdul Carter. I have seen comments start to percolate where people are calling him a generational talent. And I think that is, I think it's patently ridiculous. Maybe not ridiculous because he is a great player and I think he's going to be great at the next level. But I think people are misconstruing the real conversation about Abdul Carter and the type of player that he is and how good he's going to be for thinking he's better than in terms of like coming out of college where he's at then like I think that people are trying to put him on par with other can't miss players, which that's nobody's really can't miss, but there are some rarities where that happens. And I don't think he's there. The best example is the guy who'd be playing opposite of Myles Garrett. Myles Garrett coming out in 2017 was a no-brainer pick at number one. Unless you were going to do, it's kind of a similar situation. Unless the Browns are going to go quarterback and take like a Mitch Trubisky, it was obvious that you take Myles Garrett because he was truly a generational talent. Everybody felt that way. And there was no weaknesses in his game. There was nothing that really concerned you. And the Browns pulled the trigger, and they've reaped the benefits of it. Myles Garrett is a bona fide, going to be, enshrined in Canton one day player. And, it was an obvious pick that year. I don't think that player exists in this 2025 draft. I don't think there's somebody that you absolutely positively have to take if you're not going quarterback, because he's going to transform the NFL, and he's going to be a truly transcendent player. And that coming out of college already. Those players are few and far between anyway. But it feels like that is the way Carter's being talked about. Like, you have to take Carter because he's a generational talent. And I just don't see that. And frankly, let me rephrase. It's not that I don't see that he can be great. I just don't think he is a generational player, or should be dubbed a generational player coming out of the college level right now. He's a guy who's played he's been a pass rusher for basically 1 year. He played linebacker before that. He's got this foot issue that I do think should be somewhat of a red flag. Maybe it's not concerning enough for somebody not to take him high, but it is something that's notable to the player that he is. That is something that could derail your career and prevent him from ever becoming a great player in this league. But he's smaller sized. People have brought that up. Like, I don't see him as like this can't miss prospect. I think he's really good. I think he's worthy of going in the top 3, 4, 5 picks. But I'm not going to sit here and like make it bigger than it is. And to be fair, like, I don't even necessarily think we can say that about Travis Hunter in this draft. Like, I'm not sitting here saying Travis Hunter is a generational player either. That remains to be seen. But I do think the ceiling is higher on Travis Hunter, being that maybe even just slightly than it is for Carter. And part of that is he plays both ways and wants to play both ways. But to even do that to this point in his career, I think speaks to the level of athlete that he is. And so there's something there just intangibly that he brings to the table that Carter doesn't. And I do think too, like, yes, Carter is consensus number one defensive lineman in this class. There are other really good defensive linemen in this class that I think could turn out to be really good players. I'm really high on Mike Green, for example. Shamar Stewart is another one. He had a really good combine, but his tape is great as well. Like, those two guys could be other great pass rushers in this class that you could get later on. And it's a deep class. Travis Hunter, on the other hand, he is being graded as corner number one by most, and wide receiver at least like 1A alongside Tet. Like, he is that good, and people have seen it. They're evaluating him that way. They're grading him that way. I see it. I would value him that way and grade him that way. And as we know, the Browns have said they view him more as a wide receiver. It would still seem a little strange for me for them to take a wide receiver, somebody they view primarily as a wide receiver at 2. But Hunter's different in that, yes, he has the ability to play both sides. And so I think if you're talking about like best player available, he fits that billing more than Carter does, even though maybe it's not a perfect selection there. And it's a little fluky, because why is a team that doesn't have a quarterback taking a primarily wide receiver that they see at 2? But like the tape says it all. I mean, guy won the Heisman for a reason. The ball skills are great, as Angie Berry's brought up. Great route runner. There's so many times where like he makes a play that makes a bunch of guys miss and can do some different things, on top of being a solid corner in his own right as well. How the Browns would utilize him would be interesting, because again, in viewing him as more of a wide receiver, that would generally, it's going to be easier to make him a corner and then have a package for him on offense. But if the Browns told him, like, we're going to use you mostly on offense and then we'll throw you in on nickel sometimes, maybe they would do things differently. I don't know. But there's more, I think, potential for Travis Hunter to be the generational player of this class, if there even is one in this class, than I think even Abdul Carter. And I don't think that should be misconstrued, which is why I'm sitting here telling you, if the Browns decide they're not going quarterback because they're not going to rush this thing, they're not going to force the issue, and they don't feel like anybody's worthy, I can get behind that. I can understand that. I honestly think going with Travis Hunter at 2 makes more sense if the strategy is best player available over Abdul Carter.